Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vocally Annotated. As you can see from the title, this episode is all about the quarter life crisis and why I think it's kind of a scam. The quarter life crisis itself is not the scam, it's the way it's framed that's the scam. The idea for this episode came from talking to multiple friends who, now we're in our late 20s, we've known each other since we were teenagers, and, they're crushing it in every way that people are really conscious of crushing it, right? Like in their careers, in terms of adulting and just doing the thing in relationships, a lot of them. And yeah, multiple people have said to me, like, I feel like I'm behind, I feel like I'm not doing enough, I feel like something's wrong, like I like my career, but something's still wrong, or I don't like my career, and what do I do with that now? And I was like, but these are all questions that I had. And increasingly over the years, I remember I had all these kinds of questions a few years ago. And at that time, I was really seeing a lot about the quarter life crisis and how it was becoming more of a thing. And it was more of a thing that people were talking about, like, forget the midlife crisis, it's all about the quarter life crisis now. And so now that's my thing. I'm just like, why is this? What is going on? Why are we all experiencing the same thing? But because I already went through this, like, a couple of years ago, I'd say, when I'm talking to my friends now, I feel able to say, like, these are the things that helped me. These are, obviously, I can't speak definitively and blah, 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 and tell you what to do and be prescriptive, but these were the things that really helped me. These are the reasons why I am no longer in this position. And from whatever conversation I've been able to have with people have found it useful, or I haven't been able to have full conversations with people because, you just get interrupted or the conversation moves on or whatever. So this is all of it condensed into this episode for my wonderful friends, if you're listening, for anyone else who's listening who has been going through this and, wants some advice, wants some guidance, this is the episode for you. I do have notes for this episode, so if I'm looking down, I am reading my notes because I don't want to miss anything, and I want to make sure that I'm talking through this thoroughly and really making this a good resource. Hi, hello, editing Sarika here. I just wanted to clarify some things. Even though this video is meant to be a full resource on, the mindset behind the quarter life crisis and then how to deal with it and resolve it and fully understanding it, it's not going to be a fix-all answer for everything. Even though I've been through this process and I feel a lot more secure in understanding myself and what it is I want and need from life, it doesn't answer all the questions. I am still, like, some of the questions I had a year ago have, when I think about them now, like, I think differently than I thought about them a year ago, and my opinions and everything keep continuing to evolve and grow, which is a good thing and it's what you want. So I'm not saying that this will be the magic cure and give you the answers, the secret keys to the universe. I think the quarter life crisis is more about resolving the uncertainty of who you are and what you're capable of. And once you resolve that, then of course you'll keep questioning things and things will keep evolving and changing, but you'll feel a lot more equipped to tackle them. And that's the major point I wanted to add to this. The first thing to ask is, where does the quarter life crisis come from? And to me, it comes from all those years of having this identity handed to you, this identity of, like, you're a young child and you spend a lot of time with your family, like the early years, right, 0 to 5. Then you spend a lot of time in school, compulsory education, primary, secondary school. You go to university. You come out of university on the other side. And now it's like, okay, cool, go get a job. You go get a job, and then that's it. That's your life for the next 40 years. And I think we underestimate, like, everyone talks about what a transition it is to go from being a student, especially an undergraduate student, to working full time. But I think it's deeper than that, because when you're a kid, like when you're talking about really small children, right, between the ages of 0 and 2, you don't even talk about them in terms of their age in years. You talk about them in their age in months because they grow so quickly and there's so much developmental change that happens in that time that it's not worth talking about a 1-year-old in the sense that, like, all 1-year-olds are the same. There's a vast difference between, like, a 13-month-old and a 23-month-old, right? And then when you're in school, sure, that rate of change slows down. We don't talk about a kid who's like, I don't know, 6 and 1 month versus a kid who's 6 and 11 months. We don't really do that. We talk about it in terms of school years. But that's the thing. It's like your life keeps changing every single year. You spend 1 year in reception, you spend 1 year in year 1, you spend 1 year in year 2, and this continues until you get to year 13. So every single year something new has happened, like you are in a new state, right? This state that you're in exists for a year. Everyone is very well aware of that. Then you go to university, and university is like, okay, you still have first year, second year, third year, but it's not as like there's not as much emphasis put on it as there is with, you know, being in compulsory education, the way people talk about like I was saying, year 1, year 2, year 3. But it's still like, okay, you do this module for a semester, that's 12 weeks, short term. University itself overall, this little bubble of your life, is 3 years, that's short term. If you do a master's, that's 1 year. If you do a PhD, that's 3 years. These are all very short-term segments of your life. And this is something I've really struggled with, because by the time you leave uni and you're working as an adult, that's it. There's no more segments of your life. If there are going to be any more segments of your life, you have to define them by, you know, jumping into a different career, or you move up in seniority, have different responsibilities, like you change careers. It's up to you, but there's no defined thing. Like, you are just doing this for an undefined, like a long, like a block of time. And this is also something I realized when I got married, because I was like, even if you want to, like, marriage, I think it's more exacerbated than even working, because working is like, okay, I'm doing this for the next 40 years. At some point I'll retire, and then that will be its own like block of time that you hope will be a long time after that, but it's still very like vague and undefined. Whereas marriage, like, providing everything goes well, it's a till death do us part situation. You have to look at everything as being for the long haul, right? What happens now in the first year won't necessarily matter 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 40, 50 years from now, should you be so lucky, right? Touch wood. All that to say, I think that the novelty of that constant change, like, you don't get that anymore. And instead, it turns into decision fatigue, because there is no predetermined path for you to go down, right? When all the decisions are yours, when there's no institution for you to refer to, when there's no obvious next steps, it creates this feeling of decision fatigue, because now you have to do it. Like, it's all on you. And I think this is also, like, when you get to your mid-20s, it's also a very critical point in terms of that, because now you're reaping what you've sown in all your previous decisions leading up to this point, and with enough years behind you to notice the patterns. Like, if you didn't start extracurriculars when you were a teenager at the latest, then that might have affected what university you went to. And then if you didn't go to, I don't know, a very prominent university, that might affect like what jobs you have access to. If you picked a certain course to do at uni, that might affect like what jobs you have access to as well. And with a lot of those decisions, there were things that you didn't necessarily have control over, like whether you did extracurriculars as a kid or even as a teenager. I consider teenagers children. That seems like a take that shouldn't be controversial, and yet people are still like, no, teenagers are different. I don't think teenagers are different. I think you should be treating teenagers how you treat kids, broadly speaking, right? And then when you are 18, you make these decisions about like, this is what I'm going to study at university, or this is what you do at university. There's only so much you can do with the information you have. And people have to say like, oh, this person didn't do this and this person did that. But it's about that access to information. It's about the access to, you know, the advice they had around them at the time. So I think people get a lot of flack for that, individuals. But also, by the time you get to your mid-20s, it's at that point where it's like, okay, but you are an adult now, and you are more fully an adult, more than you were at 18, more than you were at 2021. Now you have to take responsibility. And even if you feel like I didn't get to do all these things and I didn't have these opportunities, now there is no escaping the fact that you have to take responsibility for your own life and you have to do something about it. You were dealt the cards you're dealt. Now it's up to you to play them. And that is a difficult feeling. That is a difficult feeling to struggle with, especially like going from school to university is you coming out of your bubble, and then going from university to the world of work is even more of a like, okay, I've left the bubble now. You know, we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. And I think through all of this, there's also the acknowledgement that up until now, especially if you were the kind of person who like did the thing, like if you studied a degree that would lead to a stable career while you're at uni, and you know you did all the right things and you padded out your CV in the right way, by the time you get to your mid-20s, you're the person who actually has to live it. It's very easy, I think, when you have the novelty of like things changing every year, every 2 years, to just keep putting one foot in front of the other and you just keep moving forward because everything's already changing. But by the time you get to your mid-20s, now you actually have to live that life that you set up. And I think that's why a lot of people start to question, like, is this really me? Is this what I wanted? Is this actually... And you know, I think this applies even if you don't have very pushy parents, because there'll still be some element of, like, you should be doing this from people around you, whether that's teachers or your community or whoever it is. And I think this puts you at odds, basically, with like the assigned self that they've given you and the emerging self that is coming through as you grow into adulthood. For example, like people who do medicine for 6 years and they just keep putting one foot in front of the other and they do all the exams and stuff, and then they qualify as a doctor, and one day they wake up and they're like, hey, I didn't actually want to be a doctor, right? This was something I had. So I did a master's in law, and it was a conversion course that also happened to have a master's element. But when I first went to uni, I actually went to uni to do law. I did history in the end and I switched it, but I went to uni to do law. And I remember, like, I did law because people around me were like, it's more stable than history, it'll be a better bet for you, blah, 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 blah. You should do it. Okay, fine. I thought at the time, I was 19, and I thought that maturity was listening to this advice. I thought that that was a sign of, you know, like, I'm an adult now and I will actually consider this advice instead of just saying, no, I don't want to do it. So I considered it, I took it on. And I remember in that year having that realization that, like, you study a law degree. And at the time, I didn't know what else you could do with the law degree. My only assumption, all I knew was you become a solicitor, you become a barrister, you do something with it. But so you study this law degree, you study it for 3 years. Law degrees were difficult. Every time I told someone that, like, oh, I'm studying law, they were like, oh, you're going to spend all your time, like, reading and studying, because that's all law students do. Like, they have so much work to do. And then even then, at the end of that, once I was done with all that, I would still have to do separate exams and jump through separate hurdles to actually qualify. And I remember hearing that and being like, I don't think this is for me. It was one thing to sign up to do a degree when I didn't know what doing a degree entailed. It is another to have now signed myself up to all this extra work for a life I don't even really want, which I think leads into the question that is ultimately impossible to ask, which is, what do you want? It's way easier to say what you don't want than it is to identify what you do want, especially at this stage in your life. And that is, I mean, in general, I think that applies, and I would say, like, bonus tip in this episode, but it's way easier to identify what you don't want than what you do want, and you can use what you don't want to identify what it is you do want. So I think it's like, sometimes it's not even worth it. I'd argue most of the time it's not even worth it to figure out what you want. It's better to figure out what you don't want and go from there. But actually, when it comes to answering this question, I did do an episode on this, on understanding your sense of FOMO and insecurity a few months ago, so I will link that in the show notes. But basically my point was that jealousy is your signal, right? The discomfort is your signal. And if you are jealous of someone or you're envious, that shows you what you actually want for yourself. It's not inherently a bad emotion. I think we're too quick to vilify it as an emotion rather than seeing the use in it, seeing what it can be and what it could be signaling. And I think that instead of using jealousy as the signal for like what it is I actually want to be doing, people will respond to this discomfort in one of three ways. The first trap is misapplying the spinster mindset. I talked about the spinster mindset in I'm going to say quite a controversial episode where I was talking about Eloise Bridgerton. Even if you're not a Bridgerton fan, you can find use in this, so please don't stop listening. But basically, Eloise Bridgerton's whole thing is that she wants to be a spinster. She doesn't want to be married at this point in time in the Bridgerton universe. She has been saying this for the last 4 seasons. However, my argument was that actually she doesn't have the spinster mindset, because if she had the spinster mindset, she would know what it is. Again, she doesn't know what she wants from her life. She can say what she doesn't want, but she's not taken that to figure out what it is she does want. She doesn't want marriage, but she doesn't know what she actually wants to do with her time and with her energy. She just wants to sit around and be rich and complaining. She doesn't have ideas for like, okay, I will do this to occupy my time, I will do that. And that was like the point I was getting at, where I was like, if you're going to be a spinster, you need to know what you're doing with your life, right? You need to have something that you want to fill your time with. And I would apply that here as well, except where I'm saying gets misapplied is basically when it turns into a thing where you're constantly building yourself, you're constantly in preparation mode. And that's where it goes from being a useful thing for like planning your life and thinking about what it is you actually want to do, to just being a thing where you're like constantly doing the work, but you're never actually there, and you never end up executing anything because you're constantly being prepared to execute the thing, even when you're already qualified to do it, right? The second trap is the optimization spiral, which I think we're all familiar with at this point, especially if you follow any kind of wellness or, thing on social media. And even if you don't follow it, you'll have seen it. But this idea that everything should be optimized. Optimizing something used to mean something, right? It used to mean like the most efficient way to do something. You can still get results by doing what you're doing, but if you wanted to be a bit more efficient about it, this is what you do. Whereas now I feel like everything just has to be optimized, otherwise you won't get any results and you won't get anywhere. It's like you can still end up in, let's say, a career as a solicitor by you can still end up in that career by studying something completely unrelated for undergraduate and doing a law conversion course, and maybe you want to throw a master's in there as well, and then you do the SQE exams, and then you go and find qualifying work experience or a training contract or something, and you can still end up as a solicitor. But then the optimized way is to do it as a bachelor's degree, and you go straight into the SQE exams and you go straight into your work experience or training contract. But it's like both of those will get you to the same destination. You don't need to hyper optimize every part of it to get there. But I think that's where we've gone wrong in the last couple of years. And I think that this idea that, it kind of ties into the first trap I was just talking about in terms of like misapplying the spinster mindset, where this constant self-improvement gets mistaken for like actual direction, actually doing something. And effectively, again, you're using like grind setting your way through life as a way to avoid things. And it also just takes the fun out of everything. Like it becomes a thing where it's like you have to optimize the optimized way to do things. And it's no longer fun. Like optimizing your life is supposed to improve your life. But if all you do is stress about how optimized your life is, then it's really not doing the thing it was supposed to do. And at that point, you need to take a step back. And the problem isn't you, but you ultimately need to be the one to take a step back. Right, because I was talking to a friend about this particular thing. Like this came up while we were talking about the whole quarter-life crisis thing. She is very much into wellness, and she was like, I just feel this constant thing to be optimizing, but like then it becomes stressful. And it's like, well, wasn't the point of optimizing everything so that it wasn't stressful? And if you're not, I also fall into this, right? I've fallen into this trap before, and I feel like as long as you use social media in any sort of wellness capacity, you will keep falling into this trap because it's constantly trying to push this thing on you to keep optimizing. And I'm like, no, we need to continually be taking the step back to remember that if it's stressing you out, it's not optimized. Like, it's not doing the thing it's supposed to do. If it's not functional for you, if it's not actually improving your life and it's adding more work, then you need to nix it. And this leads me to my third trap, which is overcorrecting for rest. There's this idea that I just need to slow down is a universal answer, but it's really not. And I don't see people talking about this really in a way that I feel means anything. But to give a personal example, right? In the gym, I really like lifting weights. That is one of my favorite forms of exercise and activity. I just happen to really like that. It really works for my brain. It really makes me feel good. But ultimately, when it comes to lifting weights, it does put stress on your body. And your body can't necessarily distinguish between stress, like mental stress and physical stress. Stress is stress. So when I was going through a stressful period, I was like, okay, let me pull back on weightlifting and let me do something else that's less stimulating because I don't want to overdo it. And so I scaled it back to figure out a workout plan that was less stimulating. And I was like, cool. This is how I will deal with this stressful period in my life. However, that didn't end up working. I think I adhered to that program less than I would have if I just continued lifting weights and doing what made me happy. And I realized after that sometimes understimulation is the problem. The level of stimulus I get from lifting weights makes me feel good, is cathartic for me, and ultimately, I didn't need less stimulus. And I think that there is a tendency to overcorrect and to be like, well, if you're going through this thing, then like we'll cut back on other things. And sometimes it's like you do need that stimulus. Your body, your mind, you want that stimulus. And resting this much isn't doing for you what you think it's going to do. So then the follow-up question is, what will do for you what you think it's going to do? And I think this is where we need to reframe a bit. And instead of looking at what you want to do, look at who you want to be. And this is where I'm going to go through the 3 exercises I used to figure out who I wanted to be and then where I was going to go from there. The first place I started was with the Odyssey plan. At the time of recording this is very timely because the movie is just released, but it has nothing to do with the movie. Basically, with the Odyssey plan, it's people use it as a journaling prompt. So the first prompt is your current path, which is what your life would look like in 5 years if you continued on your present trajectory. The second prompt is the alternative path. What would you do, or where would you be in 5 years if your current path vanished? If everything, like let's say you have business, if you lost your business overnight, what would you do? Kind of thing, right? Or if you lost your job tomorrow, kind of what would you do? And then you've got your wildcard path, which is in 5 years, what does your life look like if you weren't restrained at all by money or societal expectations? You could do whatever you wanted. What would your life look like? And this exercise was truly a game changer for me in starting this whole process of reflection and figuring out where I was going and what I was doing and who I wanted to be, as we've discussed. Because I realized at the time that I did it that the path I was on wasn't the path I wanted to be on. And ultimately, that's the reason why I ended up going back and getting my master's in law. And considering that working, at least to me, feels like this big, just 40-year expanse of like doing the same thing over and over again, just waking up every day and doing the same thing, it was useful and reassuring to imagine these 3 different versions of what my life could look like within 5 years. Like 5 years is a long time. A lot can change in 5 years. I actually struggle sometimes to think about like how long time periods are. Like when someone, like, speaking of the Odyssey, like how Penelope waits 20 years for Odysseus, and I'm like, yeah, that's a long time, but like also why is it that big a deal? For me personally, like my trick is I always think about it in terms of human ages, and I'm like, oh, a person changes a lot between 0 and 20, so 20 years is a long time, right? Even between the ages of 0 and 5, a person changes a lot. So that's kind of how I think about it. It's also very useful in, like, when I was studying history, because you would have, you might be discussing, oh, this happened over a 30-year period. And I was like, and if it's the 30-year period was a few centuries ago, it's very easy to just kind of feel like, yeah, well, it was the 16th century and it was all kind of similar and whatever. But then if I actually think about it, like in terms of a person's lifespan, 30 years is a long time. So then it's like, oh, that actually was a long time in a lot of things. changes would have happened. It just helps to contextualize things for me. That's an aside. But yeah, the Odyssey plan really did help me because it made me realize that the path I was on wasn't the path I wanted to be on. And it gave me that impetus to change it and go try something new and do something different. The second exercise that really helped me was Susie Welch's Values Bridge. I'm going to leave this linked in the show notes in the description box below. But basically you do this quiz and you go through, I don't remember which order it's in, but it's basically like what your life looks like now and what you would want your life to look like. And then from that, it pulls your top 5 values and also how aligned your life is to those values. And I found that really helpful. I kind of already had an idea about my values, but I did it as a clarifying exercise, and I actually think it worked really well, and it's been really useful. It's been more useful than I realized to have it to refer to, especially because like if you're job hunting, for example, or you're thinking about careers, it's very easy to get caught up in what would be a good thing to do, right? And I don't even necessarily mean like good in a traditional sense, like I was saying earlier, like being a doctor, a lawyer, whatever it is, but like good for you and your situation. For example, like if you were someone who wanted to have children within the next few years, or like at some point in your life, you might get guided into a career that's more, you know, having more options for flexibility down the road, even if it's not a career that would actually necessarily suit you. Like for me, I know that I don't do well in careers where I have to work with people one-on-one. I just don't. It's not, and that includes teaching. Like as much as I feel like I'm a decent teacher, naturally, as in I've never done any training for it, I would be terrible as a teacher in a conventional sense in front of classroom of kids trying to talk them through things. And I would be absolutely terrible as someone who had to work with someone one-on-one. So that closes off a lot of, you know, options for me in terms of careers and jobs and stuff. But that's good. Those were not things I would have been good at anyway. Those are not things I would have enjoyed, and it would have been a miserable experience all around. And even though I know that about myself, it might still have been a thing that I was tempted to take because someone said to me like, oh, this will be good, like you should try this, you'll be good at this, whatever. But having that values bridge backs me up and being able to say like, no, that's not aligned with my values. And, you know, values aside, also just in general, the kind of person I am, the way I work, but like that is also taken into account in the values bridge. I do want to say as well, like as I was talking about it, I was thinking like the idea of the values, or like that not being aligned with my values sounds almost kind of religious, but this actual like the activity is not religious at all, I didn't feel. I just wanted to mention that. Values bridge, even if you're like, again, like I was, where you're like, I kind of already have an idea of what my values are, do it and just clarify. The point of doing these exercises isn't so that you uncover the secrets of the universe, right? It's to clarify the things for you. And like you probably already knew them, but maybe knew them in the back of your head, or you're not really acting on them or whatever, or you even kind of like vaguely know about them as an abstract concept. Having it clarified is super, super helpful. And the third thing that really helped me, kind of tying in with what I was saying about the values bridge, is your zone of genius versus your zone of competence and figuring those out. If you are an intelligent person, if you are smart, you can pick things up fast, you are multi-talented. I don't know about you, but when I was younger, I was told like you could do anything you want. You could be anything you want because you are capable. And I took that when I was younger, and it was like, I think people say it as praise when you're, or like they say it as a positive thing, rather, let's put it that way. They say it as a positive thing, like you could be anything you want. And it's supposed to give you that sort of like courage to go after the things you want, I guess. And when I was younger, I just didn't think very much about it. And I was just like, okay, cool, whatever. But once I was older and I was actually trying to figure out my career, my direction, I was like, well, I could be anything I want, but what do I want to be? If I'm good at everything, like what do I then focus on? There are certain things I'm not good at, but like if I could do anything, if I just worked hard enough at it, then surely that would be the case here. Like I don't know how to code, but if I taught myself how to code, then I could be a decent data scientist, right? And this becomes a problem. And this is where I would say, like, this is the zone of competence, right? Like you could be good at many things, but what is your zone of genius? What is the thing that makes you light up? What is the thing where you don't really have to convince yourself to want to do it? You can do it easily, naturally, it flows. You get into a flow state. It all feels good, you feel compelled to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. Your zone of genius is what you're truly exceptional at. There's a really loud plane flying overhead. Your zone of genius is what you're truly exceptional at, whereas your zone of competence is you defaulting to what you're good at, but not exceptional. For some people, these things might be the same thing, and that's absolutely fine. I think the important thing is that you're working in your zone of genius. If it's also your zone of competence, then like great. But I think when it comes to your zone of genius, even if you're not like currently working in that, you will also progress a lot faster if you start doing it. Right? If you start learning at it, the whole point, it being your zone of genius and you achieving this flow state and whatever, is that if once you do it, you're able to pick it up faster and do things. For me personally, I would say podcasting is my zone of genius. This is the thing I really enjoy. I started OMG Spill with my best friend, Kirtana, in 2021. It was called something different back then, but we started it in 2021. And then, we live in different time zones. As life got busier, it became harder to navigate our schedules and stuff to actually do that consistently. And I really, really missed it. And I couldn't figure out like what to do till eventually in 2024, I started this podcast. And, I guess what I'm saying is like clearly podcasting was a thing that I couldn't draw myself away from, right? When that break happened and OMG Spill went on hiatus, it would have been very easy for me to say like, okay, cool, that was a project I did at that one point in my life and like, that's it kind of thing. But yeah, that didn't happen. I came back, I'm doing this. I have definitely noticed the difference between now and like, don't go watch my early podcast, but like I'm so much more confident on camera than I used to be because I never used to record on camera. And it's just something I continue to keep doing and I keep learning and I keep having like, I've got so many ideas at the moment for things I want to talk about and it's just great. And I was reflecting on this the other day because I was like, when I was in year one, okay, my teacher had this system where everyone had their table. She was obsessed with Winnie the Pooh. So each table in the classroom was a different Winnie the Pooh character. Everyone on that table had this folder where if you didn't complete your work in class, it would go in this folder. And then when everyone else was having like golden time or fun time, you had to be inside finishing the work in your folder. It was just a thing she did with everyone, but my folder was perpetually full because I was always talking and I was never getting my work done. And I just find it so funny to think about now. Like I get to talk and do this. And I'd love to do speaking engagements and I would love to do more of this. So it's just like the thing that I used to get in trouble for when I was 6 years old is the thing that I'm now doing, not only for fun, but I would like to take in a more professional direction as well. So damn, if she could see me now, I think she would be very amused. I think that is unintentionally a helpful tip as well. If you're not sure what your zone of genius is, perhaps you've been operating in your zone of competence for too long, figure out the things that you were good at as a kid, the things you enjoyed as a kid, the things you naturally did as a kid, before everyone started putting pressure on you and it became a thing of like you have to be an adult and you have to like do the mature thing and do the right thing. What was it that you were doing anyway when you were a kid? What was it you were getting in trouble for? What was it everyone was coming to you for? Maybe you won't find all the answers there because one thing people used to come to me for all the time as a kid was to draw pictures for them because I used to be really into drawing when I was a kid. And so frequently people, the funny thing is I liked drawing. I liked drawing like cartoon characters and whatever. I liked drawing people. I didn't like drawing landscapes and scenery as much, but I liked drawing people, but I liked drawing them. I never liked coloring them in. So people would like teachers or adults would be like, oh, you didn't finish your drawing. And I'd be like, no, to me it's finished. I just wanted to do the outline. And sometimes I think about that and I'm like, maybe I should pick that up again and make my own coloring book because that's ultimately what I wanted to do if I never wanted to color the pictures in. But yeah, that was one thing I used to do. Like even at the age of 6, like people used to come to me and be like, can you draw this thing? And I would draw it for them, give it to them, and then they would take in color and they were happy and I was happy. It was an arrangement that worked very well for us. But wait, why did I start talking about this again? Okay, yeah, basically what I was saying is that you won't necessarily find all the answers in what you did as a kid, right? Because I wouldn't call drawing my zone of genius now, but I would say talking is, and I've always been a yapper since day one. Anyway, to bring this all back to the point, the quarter life crisis it's not you flopping. It's not your failure. It's not like, oh, you're confused and you're lost. I would argue that a quarter-life crisis is a good thing because it means you are self-reflective and introspective, and you can think about architecting the life you actually want rather than the one you were told you wanted or you should want. It means you're actually paying attention, which is definitely a good thing in a culture that rewards you for not paying attention, right? You get rewarded for swallowing your questions or your feelings of discomfort and shutting up and like just continuing to do the thing, get up and go to work every single day and not question it. So to go against that and to question it, to be paying attention, to be thinking about it and what it is you actually want out of life is a big deal. It's just not a big deal in the sense that like you're confused and you're lost and there's something wrong with you. And so I just want to say, if you've made it to the end of this episode and you're listening to this right now, I'm really proud of you. Thank you very much for listening to Vocally Annotated. I very much hope that this episode was helpful and useful, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. This was a slightly different kind of episode and format for me. It was something I felt was really important to talk about, and I really felt compelled to talk about it, but I would love to hear if it, like, how it resonated, good or bad, so please do feel free to drop that in a comment. And let me know if you want more things like this. I would also like to say that this is the 20th episode of the podcast, so that's a neat little milestone, and I feel, you know, I suppose this is more like, it's not a bloopers reel, but this is, you know, not the main point of the podcast. But I feel very inspired at the moment, and I've got a lot of hopefully cool ideas planned, lined up, so stay tuned for that. I'm very excited. But for now, I will leave this here. Thank you very much for listening, and good luck with everything. Have a great rest of your day.